Hello and welcome back to the FlurrySports Podcast. We're live again after last week, after the cornbread participation in the chat. I mean, really made the show. There's a different energy around a live crowd, and I'd love to feel that someday, Jake. I'd love to feel it someday. But for now, we're digital. It's episode 191. What better way to celebrate 191 episodes than to do a live stream on the FlurrySports Podcast? So that's exactly what we're doing. And today, we have quite the segment, quite the planned out segment, because Jake has been doing some research. He has been in the lab. He has been figuring out multiple things. First off, what's it take to get into the NFL Hall of Fame? We'll discuss that. And then two, if all these pesky Hall of Famers didn't exist, who's the best ball coach? Because anyone can coach a good football team. You hear Urban Meyer, or not Urban Meyer. Hopefully you don't hear Urban Meyer. Nick Saban. Nick Saban's whole thing ever since retiring, he likes to say he found out he's not good at coaching bad players, so he only recruited good players. To me, that sounds like Nick Saban can't coach football. I don't know about you. But it's pretty easy to coach John Elway. It's pretty easy to coach Joe Montana. But is it easy to coach Teddy Bridgewater? No, it's not. It's not easy to coach Will Levis, as we'll probably see on Monday Night Football tonight. So Jake's going to figure out, he's going to take away all of the wins from Hall of Fame, just quarterbacks, right?
Yes. So, to Zach's point, I've taken away who is the best coach of all time if I took away every win they had with a Hall of Fame quarterback.
And we're talking regular season because, I mean, that's where the bulk of the coaching happens. Once you get into the dance, anything can happen. Who knows?
That's right. I did. So in real time last week, Zach gave some feedback. So just to talk through the criteria of the list, I did add in what is being retroactively called the Zach Bruner rule. So
love this.
Yeah, I think you're going to. So first off, no oldie moldies on here. This is the Super Bowl era, at least primarily. For example, Lombardi out because yes, he did coach in the Super Bowl era, but like so barely and so almost exclusively with Hall of Fame quarterbacks that it wasn't worth including. Someone like Tom Landry or Don Shula, who barely coached ahead of time but still coached plenty in the Super Bowl era, would be included. And I did my best to include still their numbers in that short window in front if it was with a non-Hall of Fame quarterback. So that's the first basic rule. Then Zach went through and did what I could in terms of found all of the games that they won. And I will say I went by their regular season list, like you said. So I took out all the games that they won with a Hall of Fame quarterback starting for them, and went through from there. So took all of that out, got my initial list. And then based on your feedback last week of, well, what about the big one? You know, what is the point if they didn't win a Super Bowl? And even though I'm not including postseason wins, because then the list just gets too weird and chunky in terms of totals.
Yeah.
I did include what I'm calling the Super Bowl bump, which is if you made a Super Bowl appearance without a Hall of Fame quarterback, I gave you 5 extra wins.
Okay, that's fine.
Arbitrary,
yeah, sure.
But it's consistent, but it's arbitrary. If you won a Super Bowl without a Hall of Fame quarterback, I gave you 10 extra wins.
You're going to say 7. So you get,
no, 5 and 10. I guess. Okay.
Okay, That's good. That's good.
Because trying to put numerical value on a Super Bowl, that felt okay. And I think as the list shakes out, you're going to see, I think that adds somewhat the important amount of value. So let's say someone made 2 Super Bowls, but won one of them. That would be an additional 15 wins because they got 1 win on there and an extra appearance where they lost. So
as a Packer fan, I also will say Super Bowl is equivalent to a 10-win season. So the Packers have plenty of Super Bowls during this quarterback run that we will count. But they are Hall of Famers, so they will not.
Yeah. And then, as Zach mentioned, what I think it's going to be most controversial, as you may imagine, there are I'll tell you right now in the list is a little bit of a preview for those listening that there are, hold on, lost my list. Nope, there it is. Okay. There are 2 current coaches on the list.
Okay.
There is a current coach who I have as an honorable mention. And then there are 2 coaches which I would consider very recently retired. Like they've got some quarterbacks who are still in the ether of will this quarterback make into the Hall of Fame or not? In what I'm calling the Belichick rule, which is if I counted all of Tom Brady's wins, guess what?
Right.
Belichick would be number 1. We know Tom Brady is a Hall of Famer. I don't think anyone was going to begrudge that rule, but what gets tricky is where do I draw the line? So I've drawn it to Zach's point where I consider a guarantee. That's what I'm going to do at this point. I think there's going to be one player I get a little pushback on that I've guaranteed in, but otherwise, I think I'm mostly going to get pushback on people that you think are locks for the Hall of Fame that I'm like, I just right now don't know if I'd bet my lungs on this guy getting in.
Sure. And that we can say this is your Hall of Fame. That's fine. You can put ownership over it.
That's fine. And if you're wondering what that line is, I'm calling it the Phil Simms line, which is Phil Simms isn't in and he's got 2 Super Bowls. And so, like, are you better than Phil Simms historically? That's my line. So if you want to get mad at somebody, get mad at me thinking Phil Simms better than name quarterback here. So in terms of a Hall of Fame candidacy. So that's what I got, Zach. So I've got some maybes in there. Does that make sense for the math? And then we can talk through it in terms of placement, because then you and I are going to work through as we talk through it if we feel like some people should be dropped or added. And you can ask any questions about folks who didn't make the list on like why, because we throw one out there. Our boy Dan Reeves didn't make the list because a lot of his wins are John Elway related.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
So
that makes sense.
There we go. So we'll talk through it. If there's someone who jumps out at you, we can go. But let me start with my honorable mention because this sets the stage perfectly. You brought this name up last week, and I didn't have it in my heart to put it on the list because he has 2 maybes. He's a current coach, and I think that one of his are for sure going to get in. And even if he doesn't, he's got 2 maybes. So I rounded up. So that coach is John Harbaugh.
Okay.
So John Harbaugh's total win amount, so this is his actual real life wins for regular season, is 162. So right now, if you look at that list, John Harbaugh is 19th all time in the win column. He's obviously still coaching. That number is going to go up. If you do the without a Hall of Fame quarterback as stands, you don't take anyone out you think is going to be a lock or whatever, that number would stay exactly the same. Because his 2 major quarterbacks that he's coached are Flacco and Lamar. Neither of them, obviously, both are still currently playing. So
they are.
Yeah, they
more
are.
than the other.
100%.
Flacco.
Go Flacco. So and then to add in the Super Bowl rule, he's appeared once and won once. Correct?
Yep.
Okay. So that's a 10. Yeah, that's a 10 additional. So that brings him to 171.
Okay.
172. Right. Sorry. Some of these current ones, if you're like the number's not exactly right, it's because I did the math and then they played this week. Yeah, that's coming in there. But 172. So that would be where he's at. So that would be good enough to scratch in at actually like 8th on our list, maybe 7th. So he could make it up there. Here's why I have him off, which is, in my book, there's just too many outliers, especially for Lamar. Lamar is a 2-time MVP. He's actively still playing and young. So he was the hardest one for me to project out if he's going to make it in. But there's not too many 2-time MVPs that aren't in the Hall of Fame in that way, especially one like if he gets a Super Bowl at some point, it's like over.
Fully a lock. Yep.
Fully a lock. And honestly, as much as a joke as it is, I at this point cannot rule out Joe Flacco eventually making the Hall of Fame. I think I can, but like in the term of history, so it was just too much for me to be like, and that would be his entire win column because Lamar is still playing for him. Like there'll be some other guys on the list who it's like, at least right now, their current guy, I don't think is a Hall of Famer. Like he has no one that he's ever coached that I could be like, yeah, you're for sure never making it into the Hall. So I have him as an honorable mention. What do you think of any of the criteria I've thrown out and John Harbaugh now that we've got an example out there as an honorable mention?
I think what you did is fine. I'm not ruling out Flacco being a Hall of Famer either, but not for anything he's already done. Maybe he goes on another run. I don't know. But given what he's done, he's not I don't think the way he's won a Super Bowl is enough because he didn't do anything other than win a Super Bowl. Like he's in the same, he's ahead of this person, but he is in the same sort of conversation as Dilfer, if we're being honest.
Yeah, and then he's honestly going to get more credit. I think he's gotten more love in his appearances as like backup turned savior over the last couple of years. Like people are like more fondly remembering him.
Yeah.
So I agree. I think what will depend is where does that line drop in the future of like I always think of comparisons. Like if Matt Ryan ever gets in,
God will help us all.
I think Flacco could. Yeah, like those two are peers. I never know where to draw the line on the Ravens are a young team. So do they get more? We're going to get into that more specifically exactly with a really good example in a little bit. But, so does he get in because he's a Raven? So I don't know. So that was an honorable mention. That feel good before we get into the official top 10 here?
Yeah, I think that's fine. Lamar truly is a wild card. Like in terms of grading this, it's impossible to do.
Yeah. And I liked having that honorable mention because I think between that and 10, we get the two parallels of where my brain had to go in making this list, which is number 10 is someone who, for the most part, I think if I threw this out, and I kind of mentioned to you last week, so you might remember what I said, but if I threw this name out there, I think he's the quintessential. This coach was so good, never made a Super Bowl, I don't know if folks would even associate him with the guy that I do think he had that's going to make the Hall of Fame. That's Marty Schottenheimer. Okay. So Marty's number 10. His win total is in real life 200. His win total with this is 154, subtracting San Diego's finest Drew Brees.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And again, now folks at home, we talked about this briefly last week. Brees is a lock to me. He
is.
Yeah. So Super Bowl winner and MVP is going to have a ton of passing records. Think he's in.
Right.
And
new records. Yeah.
Yeah. 100%. So think he's in. Weird to think of Brees in San Diego for that time. And honestly, that was a bigger chunk of Marty's wins than I would have guessed. He was in San Diego longer than I remembered. But
sorry, just reading the comments. Continue.
No, that's okay. And I can't see those. So if there's anything you want to shout out as they haven't, let me know. But so Marty's win count with our math here is 154 because he gets no additions for Super Bowl appearances or anything. That's just wins without a Hall of Fame quarterback. So still, that puts him at 10 on the list. He's kind of the drop-off line. There's a lot of guys around Marty.
Randy thinks you look jacked, by the way. Don't let that distract you, though.
Oh, thanks, dude. I feel jacked. Yeah, too much. Anyway, but I love Marty was the one I really wanted on this list, to be honest.
Okay.
He's such a journeyman. He got all these wins at all these different places. A lot of them in his time with the Chiefs. A lot of them, like people forget he was in Washington for a spell, Denver for a spell. Just like kind of went everywhere, won games everywhere. And yeah, I don't know. I think a good fit to this criteria, which is good coach who never really ever had that quarterback. Because I also, Brees went on to be Drew Brees. I don't know if he was fully that in San Diego.
No, for sure not. Not until Sean Payton.
Yeah, not until Sean Payton, guys. Hold on. By the way, Sean Payton, not on the list because all of it is essentially Drew Brees. So there you go.
For Bo Nix, though.
Yeah, that's true, but he might be All Famer too. So that said, any other thoughts on Marty at 10?
Great coach. I'm honestly surprised he made the top 10, but I think it's worth it. He's definitely an all-timer. He's great.
Yeah, Yeah, he snuck in there. There's some ones that we could argue that maybe should have replaced him. Like I said, Harbaugh could have for sure knocked him out. Now, here's where the list I think gets pretty clear cut. Here's the guy who, spoilers, lost the most wins, who still made the list, which is we got rid of Don Shula, because Don Shula, by the way, sneaky. I think he looked the worst from the math I did, because he had 3 Hall of Fame quarterbacks over his career. Unitas, Bob Greasy, and Marino. So, he knows how to pick them. Belichick, gone. Now the guy who was number 5 on the all-time win list, Tom Landry, still makes it in. He, in real life, has 250 regular season wins. He dropped all the way down without Roger Staubach, though that is his only one. Danny White hasn't made it yet. That's a lot of his other ones, but he's not in as of right now, and it's been long enough. Like Danny White hasn't been yet. Maybe he will, maybe he won't. But he's at 166. But that's no Super Bowl editions, because he never made a Super Bowl or won a Super Bowl without Staubach.
Right. That makes sense. He's a top 10 guy. So I like it. And yeah, you got to get rid of. It's just Staubach. That's the only one you can get rid of. So I think that makes sense.
He is. I also did a little fun thing of like the percentage of their wins that represents. He's by far, I'll give a hint that like the Schottenheimer was actually like the 3rd like lowest. So like a lot of the other guys on this list are 100% of their wins remained intact. Only 3 guys appeared on the list, and it's like Schottenheimer was 77. One other guy who's way further up on the list, 71% of his wins appeared. And then Landry's all the way down at like 58% of his wins appeared, just because he just coached so long, so many wins. So I appreciate that he literally just accumulated so many that he still had to make it.
Sure. Okay.
Guy who almost made in that category, just to slowly reveal who didn't make the list, Chuck Noll, Steelers legend. Terry Bradshaw played just a little too long.
Yeah. A lot of people say that, actually. Not just for this criteria.
Yeah, 100%. And then guess what? They still won games because he was playing for the Steelers. So there we go. Number 8, Zach, and in my opinion, where the list starts to get fun. Because number 8, my favorite, your favorite, with 173 real life wins. That's right. Jeff Fisher.
Yeah. I mean, no Hall of Famers. Right?
Unless no Hall of Famers. McNair's is only maybe.
Or McNair, sorry.
Who's not going to make it, you know?
Yeah, I don't think so. So, yeah. I mean, he's consistent. He's not the, he's going to be there. He's going to punch his ticket to the dance or be just outside of it. He's going to come down to that final week. He makes it interesting. The NFL needs more NFL needs more Jeff Fishers. Let's be honest.
Yeah. If you took their actual win percentage, he's for sure the lowest on the list. He just kept coaching and kept, to your point, doing like 60% win seasons. Like, there you go. He's above 500, did it again. He does get 5 additional wins for appearing in Super Bowl with the, I think, first year ever Tennessee Titans. I think their first year not being Houston. So yeah, the Music City Miracle.
So close.
That would have bumped him all the way up to like 5th place on my prestigious list. Yeah. We get tight. So to go through like my ranking of like this wins without Hall of Fame quarterback list, his number for my list with those additions in there is 178. Landry is 166, 154. Once we get above him, everyone all the way to the top is within 10.
Jeff, let's stop coaching in the UFL. We need to get his ass back in the NFL. We talk about all these coaches like, we're recycling coaches. Jeff Fisher's not even getting a call. And he's a top 10 head coach all time, according to our list.
Yeah.
What are we doing?
I will say, if I was going to make a critique, if you dig into Jeff Fisher, and this is not going to surprise anyone, but once I say it, then you'll think about it. He would have been basically in the same spot if he had never coached like the Rams, which is a little bit of a bummer. Like, he goes to the Rams and the Bradford years and everything. He basically makes no ground in the win column. So that's a bit of a bumber. Yeah. Like, he had another 10 years where he didn't really ever scratch and claw, and he wins. So that's a bummer. But he Marvin Lewis'd it at the end a little bit.
He had 1 or 2 years of Jared Goff. He had Jared Goff for a second, didn't he?
Yeah, he had 1 year of Jared Goff. God. A lot of years of Vince Young, a lot of years of McNair. Those are the bulk of his wins. So, no, he's kind of in there. And then the guy, I'm not going to lie, the guy I root for the most on the list, because this dude, straight up, he's the only one without no maybes, no Super Bowl appearances, no Super Bowl wins. Straight up, this is how many games he won. No funny business. At 184 wins is Chuck Knox, who I brought up to you last week just to be like, do you know who Chuck Knox is? Because Chuck Knox got his wins with the 70 Rams. Coach on 3 teams, but the bulk of his wins comes with the 70 Rams and the 80s Seahawks. So the Craig Seahawks, just the grossest teams. But even honestly, he almost loses no wins if you even count like playoff wins, because the playoffs were bigger. He barely made it in. He's got some with the 70s Rams and like Eric Dickerson, but not much. So he sneaks in, but just straight up, he's the 10th winningest coach of all time. Just a coach that's like, I think he's a trivia answer. Like, it's like, do you know who Chuck Knox is? And it was fun to see him make the list, because this list was for him. Like, if I have to discount everyone else's maybes, I'd give the trophy to Chuck Knox.
For sure. I'm a little surprised you didn't work the system in your favor to make that happen, because there's certainly a way to do that. And Randy, also, spoiler alert, don't do that. He said Jeff Saturday's an underrated coach. We're not done with the coach list. We'll see what happens. Never know.
Yeah, we'll see who gets in there. The guy, honestly, that I was like, I thought was going to be in there, but Knox does it even more so, is now I got to go through my initial like scratch list, so I'm probably not going to find him. But Reeves loses too many because of Denver, but his like Dirty Bird Falcons days, I was like, Dan Reeves is going to sneak in there, but no, I forgot how long he was in Denver. But not Chuck Knox. Chuck Knox is just in there, never ever going to get one of his quarterbacks put in the Hall of Fame, or I don't even know if they were nominated. So we'll see, but I like that Knoxy made the list.
Me too. That was number 7.
He's number 7, and here's where we go. So on our list, he's 184 with our adjusted win totals. 6 and up. I'm going to give you the totals right now. So if you're playing at home and you want to spoil yourself, you could do it if you could figure out my math. So 6 is going to be 185, then 189, then 190, then 191, then 191. That's right. We've got a tie that we're going to get to, and then 197. Okay. So there is a clear winner to look forward to, but I would say 6 and up is where Zach's going to be like, why is this guy ahead of this guy? Because it really gets into who I think is a Hall of Famer. That is not yet really burned into me. It starts to really become a thing. Because at number 6, Zach, recently retired. Will he return? Will he climb up this list? We'll see. Because also now we get into coaches whose win totals are higher than their actual win totals because of their Super Bowl appearances. So coming in at number 6, recently retired, Pete Carroll, who keeps all of his wins, even from his 1990s days. And look that up. Wasn't as bad as I thought it was. Want a good tip to be on the list? Coach the Jets. There's a hint for what's about to happen in the future. But there you go. But Pete Carroll's on here. He keeps 100% of his wins, of course. So all 170. He adds 15 for making 2 Super Bowls and winning one of them. So he comes in 185. So he jumps hardworking Chuck Knox with his Super Bowl appearances. So those are some of the decisions that start to get made. He is not the biggest jump on this list. The next guy takes the cake on that for sure. But I will say, Zach, here's the question. Now it starts to get in the debate.
Yeah.
I hesitated on Russell Wilson because he's a Seahawk.
That's why?
There's no Seahawk quarterback. He's got all those records with a bullet. Yeah. If you want Seahawk representation, they've got one of the fewest in the Hall of Fame. So my question of, if a Seahawk's going to make the Hall of Fame, some of the Legion of Boom for sure. Like Marshawn's a candidate this year. I think that could be an indicator, but yeah, I don't know. I have him I've obviously not counted it here, or Pete Carroll would almost have nothing. But that would be the question is, do you hesitate on if Wilson's going to be a Hall of Famer?
I think it's going to be closer than people think, but I mean, we're talking about a guy who never received a single MVP vote. I don't think he really has any records.
No.
He wasn't like an overwhelming stat producer. So we're saying there's a person who's made 2 Super Bowls, won one. I believe that's what it is, right?
Yeah.
Like I think he's damaged his career so fucking much after Seattle that he has no shot. I think like retiring at Seattle, like that end of that run, there's going to be some people pushing for it. I think he's completely ruined it.
I think so too. Now, here's an interesting question when we start getting a reputation, which is, does Pete Carroll deserve credit for what essentially, because the argument there would be, he's a defensive coach. And I've always been curious, like, does Pete Carroll deserve the credit for great defense when I think he's somewhat thought of as an offensive mind, but he's definitely on this list because if Wilson's not a Hall of Famer, then I think you give credit to how good that defense was consistently. And then, you know, it was a good all-around team, but I am curious on like some of the guys we go up, they're defensive coaches. So it makes sense that they're high on this list. He's one where it's like he's probably like eyeing that thread of, I found a quarterback just good enough to not be a Hall of Famer and still paid all my defensive players, which is probably the formula.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they did have to pay Matt Flynn there for a hot second as well. But
terrible.
But Pete Carroll, for sure, defensive head coach. I think he's one of the best football coaches of all time, whether you talk about college or NFL. So I think he's more than willing or more than worthy of this top spot, or not top, but borderline top 5 spot. Like he's incredible. I don't think Russell Wilson's a Hall of Famer. I think that defense was insane. And I think Pete Carroll is going to be a Hall of Famer, to be honest.
I think so too. Yeah.
Does that negate everything then? Or not?
I don't know. I will say one of the things I was going to look into, and for a future list, is do I reverse this list and do it with
best quarterbacks?
But then it becomes so weird because here I could boil it down to wins. And even then I'm negating postseason wins. Can I do just wins with quarterbacks? But I did think about doing that, especially because what I want to do is also say, screw you, Tom Brady. If I'm going to say, screw you, Bill Belichick.
I mean, what you're essentially doing here is you're doing, in my opinion, you're kind of doing the wins above replacement like baseball has.
That's what I wanted, was a holistic stat. So I tried to get into that. That's my favorite part about baseball is I can just compare a pitcher to everybody else. And it's not perfect, but at least I can look at something.
You can't replace a Hall of Famer at quarterback unless you're Bill Belichick. You can't do that. But you can replace a Russell Wilson. You can replace one of these guys. That's my line. That if we're going to debate about Hall of Famers in a second. You can't replace some of these guys. And with that being said, can you replace Tim Tebow? I don't think so. He's a one of one.
You notably can replace Kyle Orton with Tim Tebow in the game.
In the same game, yep.
But no, I know this stat, Zach, I wanted to look more into, but honestly, I was like, that's almost a different rabbit hole, which is how many Super Bowls have featured a Hall of Fame quarterback versus a Hall of Fame coach. I expected the disparity. So like winner or loser, just one of the two teams has a Hall of Fame quarterback. And then I did the same thing with Hall of Fame coach. 5 up to this point, and this again, clear cut. If you start counting Lamar's and things, it gets different depending on which way you go. So by my same criteria that I made this list with, I had 5 Super Bowls all time that didn't have a Hall of Fame quarterback in them. So pretty low. And again, we can do that the almost separate show sometime. By my count, that was tied, or it was like 5 to even 4 going through the year 2000 that didn't have a Hall of Fame coach. A lot of those coaches, like even if they didn't win a bunch, like how many Super Bowls did the Landrys and the Walshes appear in, if you think about it that way. Since the year 2000, that number went from 4 all the way up to 12 that I have is like, maybe you're not a Hall of Fame coach. Now that also got harder for me to be like, is John Harbaugh a Hall of Fame coach? You know, it like gets in that thing. What made it a little trickier is like, it's basically look at Super Bowls that don't have Bill Belichick in it. and then
Yeah.
figure it out from there. So I thought that was a little telling. That's like, okay, Hall of Fame quarterback, maybe he's a little harder to win with, but it just gets tough. So I was looking at things like that. But Zach, I wanted to get into who I think is maybe going to be the guy by the end of this discussion you are going to be arguing is the greatest coach of all time.
Okay, great.
Because he, on the all-time win list, I should have said Carroll's 14. He's tied with someone else coming up. He's tied with a few different guys.
But number 6 on your list, correct?
Number 6 on mine. Number 6 in the people's hearts. He's number 14 on the all-time wins list in real life. Number 23 on that regular season wins list, but number 5 on my list because he jumps all the way from 154 wins in real life and without a Hall of Fame quarterback because he never had one. But his Super Bowl number, Zach, with 3 Super Bowl wins without a Hall of Fame quarterback and 4 Super Bowl appearances without one, Washington's own Joe Gibbs jumps all the way from 154 to 189 because Joe Theismann and Doug Williams are never making the Hall of Fame.
No.
But he rode Riggins, Big Diesel, all the way to 3 Super Bowls in an era where you could do it. And now I want to hear the argument of, should he win this list? Because win total, he wasn't on there. When I did the Super Bowl thing, obviously he jumped all the way to top 5. I was arguably like, and by the way, could technically be number 2. He's not number 1. That guy's clear cut. But all the other 3 in between him and 1 have maybes that you could argue write him off this list. So
true.
If your argument was championships are what make you the most successful coach, then without a Hall of Fame quarterback, Gibbs is number 1. And it's crazy. But I'm curious what you think about that because he's also, like I said, he's not top 20 all-time wins. So it's a big jump by my arbitrary numbers.
Well, he was able to win a ton of games all time and win championships without a Hall of Fame quarterback. All these other guys.
Last year coaching, there's a gap in here, but his last year coaching is 2005.
Yeah, it's not that long ago.
No, I'm just saying, but he started in the 70s. Like he also just was one of those, like, I'm just going to coach forever.
I mean, sure, but you only get the opportunity to do that if you can actually win.
True.
Like, there's no, of course, I can't even comprehend how not winning a Super Bowl is worth a fuck. Like, I don't get it. I truly have no clue. If we're not winning, we're not trying. I don't understand. But regular season wins are fine for people who like to, like, if you at home are thinking like, I just want my team to go 9-7, 9-8 now, make the playoffs. That's all we want. I want a competitive regular season. I expect your favorite unit in gym class in high school is when you treaded water. Like you're not trying to go anywhere. I just want to stay above water. Yeah, I'm hoping not to swallow too much of the pool water. A little bit's fine. But then we'll, go to math class and smell like a fucking pool and be fine. But like, of course, Super Bowls. If we're not, I don't get it. I truly don't know. But yes, Gibbs, I'm sure is number 1 on my list when we're done. I'm sure.
Yeah, he's also like the other skill you're going to see in those above him is finding the pretty good quarterbacks.
Sure, that is a skill. And by the way, that's basic economics.
Yeah,
like in one of my most memorable moments of college in terms of class was my economics professor coming in and saying, if you're in a 90% or above, you get an A, 80% or above, you get a B. And then he said flat out to the class, if you get above a 90%, I think you're stupid. Like, why would you even try to go for a 92? There's no point. I'm not going to give you a better grade.
And I think that would be the Gibbs strategy because he had a decade where it was just like me or Shula are winning. He's got more Super Bowls than Shula.
Yeah, he does.
And it's like that quarterback comparison crazy. So it's like that would be my thing. Is like if that was a 1v1, give me Coach Gibbs all day. In that comparison. Yeah. So if you wanted to make this the most valuable coach list, it's hard not to say he's not in like the easy number 1 discussion. I'll be curious when we get to 1 because he's also a bit of a unicorn. But keep him there. I think we're very much going to be tempted to move him up the list compared to number 4. But I kept my data so far, my integrity is solid. So I have not moved him up, even though I wanted to, because at 190 with my adjusted win total, adding 2 Super Bowl wins in 2 Super Bowl appearances to a real life total of that would be sorry, I wrote it down wrong. So that is 170. So he jumps up from 14th, tied with our friend Pete Carroll, all the way up here to 190. It is the controversial, because is his quarterback a Hall of Famer or not? It is New York's finest, Jacksonville's finest, Tom Coughlin.
Mm-hmm. How can you not say Eli Manning's a Hall of Famer?
Because I don't know. Apparently, I'm in the wrong on this. I don't think so, because I think he's good. Joe Flacco, but he did it twice.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the line. Again, my line is Phil Simms. And to me, Eli Manning is Phil Simms.
Leroy Butler's in the Hall of Fame.
He's in the Packer Hall of Fame, isn't he?
He's in the NFL Hall of Fame.
Oh, I don't know. But I didn't use the Leroy Butler line. I used the Phil Simms line. And
NFL is not the hall of the best players. It truly isn't. And, you can take Dion's phrase of it's not the hall of good, whatever. The NFL, more than any other league, it's who tells the story of the league, because our story is the best story. That's all it is. And Leroy Butler invented the Lambeau Leap. Without the Lambeau Leap, that's a huge gap in the NFL's history. That's something they love. That's why he's in there. Eli Manning beat the 18-0 New England Patriots. That alone pretty much solidifies it. The fact that he knocked off Belichick twice is an automatic. He's going to be first ballot Hall of Fame.
And his last name's Manning. I
understand in terms of who's the best player, who's even good. You can argue Eli Manning's not good, but he is
question every other guy I've said isn't a Hall of Famer coming up, though, which is why maybe I'm most begrudging. Here's my argument against, here's my argument for Tom Coughlin. I don't give Eli the credit for those wins, though, in the way that it's like, I do question some of the Brady. Like, it's hard to separate Brady from Belichick. I would, who gets more credit there? I have an easy time separating Manning from Coughlin. If I had to give credit, let me start looking at the defensive Hall of Famers he had. But he also had to coach Mark Brunell, who, by the way, was also one of the captains on this list. Mark Brunell, that's how good you can be. He was a big one. Jeff George appeared a couple times. So I don't know. I went back and forth. He was just one who was like, Eli was always fine, and he had 2 playoff runs where, again, I would say he was fine until the Super Bowl, where he was very good.
So, I agree.
That was my argument. I totally understand he might make it, but that's how come I didn't disqualify him.
Odell Beckham catch. One of the biggest moments in modern NFL.
He didn't catch it. Okay.
It was also a terrible throw, but he threw that.
It's so true. Just like the throw, by the way, his most famous throw, the throw to fucking, was that Die or Hicks?
Amani Toomer?
No, in the Super Bowl helmet catch.
Was that not Toomer?
I don't think so. I think it's Hakeem Nicks.
Maybe it was.
Whoever that was, bad throw. It's a bad throw. It's a great evasion and a bad throw. Okay. So that's 4. Controversial. So far, you would have Gibbs over Coughlin, which I think
I hate fair. Tom Coughlin, but
I also knew that. So number 3, Zach, I would say number 3 also probably not going to move for weird reasons, because number 3 is number 4 on the total win column. Spoiler alert, folks, by the time he retires, he's going to be number 1. He's made the most progress recently. Number 3 is Andy Reid, who in real life, his win total is 261. He might not get Shula's in the 300, so he's got a way to go, but he's obviously got Mahomes. Now this is where people get mad at me. I've taken the Mahomes wins out. He's a Hall of Famer.
No, I think that's fair.
But will people get mad that I'm that confident with Mahomes and not that confident with Eli?
No, because Mahomes has the accolades and he's good. Eli has the accolades. He's part of the history of the NFL.
Okay.
But,
There we go. So, well, good. That makes me feel a little bit better. But Mahomes is obviously out. So he actually drops all the way. Like I've cut out, he only retains 71% of his wins. So the Mahomes stuff is big, but he keeps the before Mahomes Chiefs numbers. And I don't think McNabb's making it.
He's not.
Yeah, so he's still a candidate. It's his second year on the ballot. I don't think he's making it, though. So his adjusted number without Mahomes, he still has one Super Bowl appearance. The McNabb Eagles made it once with
McNabb's on the ballot?
McNabb's on the ballot. Second year on the ballot. Yep.
Wow.
I checked it today just to see who is still a possibility. So he's in there. I don't think he's making it. Again, it'd be the Eagles argument, which I just don't know. But I don't have him in there. So his adjusted win total was 186. I had a Super Bowl appearance. It's 191. So he sneaks in one win above Coughlin, 2 wins adjusted above Gibbs. But that is the opposite of what's going to happen in real life. Andy Reid in real life, he's going to climb this ladder. On my list, he's frozen in time because he's never going to gain any more wins as long as Mahomes is his quarterback.
And he's not coaching after Mahomes is done.
No, Joe Gibbs has a better chance of coming back, coaching someone else, hopping him on the list.
He should. Why wouldn't he?
So, but what do you think of, because Reid, I think, was the one that made you talk about the Super Bowl argument. So let's talk about Andy Reid separated from Mahomes and if he deserves to be a top 3 coach all time pre-Mahomes.
I think so. I think first off, I mean, just the most recent thing prior to Mahomes, like he made Alex Smith an MVP candidate. And like that entire offense was buzzing before Mahomes. And Mahomes just took it to another level. And then
Travis Kelce was Travis Kelce before Mahomes.
Right, correct. Yeah, people forget about that. And they had Hill, and yeah, it was great. In Philadelphia, the whole thing was like Andy Reid is, and he's perfect for this specification, right? Because it's like Andy Reid is the best coach to never win it all. For whatever reason, he makes it to the playoff, and then he does a swan dive, which shout out to, early Flurry Sports. We had Andy Reid coming on the show telling us to knock it off because we kept talking shit. But like, yeah, he was always incredible. He was always an offensive brainiac, and he just gets a good defensive coach to coach alongside him.
And he, like, the only other guy who appears,
the stuff he did with Mike Vick was insane.
Right. And I think the thing I want to give him credit for is, like, the only other guys on this list who were in the top 10 in the regular season win totals unadjusted, not my list, so less important, but are, if you go all the way back down to Landry and Schottenheimer. So like the beginning of the list, and they lose more, folks. Like Andy's going to end up losing more because the home gnomes are going to go better. But for him to be this much further above them, I think is telling when he's 4 on that list. So I think just truly great. And he found a Hall of Fame quarterback, which is going to solidify it. But maybe that's the difference between him being considered like a Marty Schottenheimer, but a better one. Yeah. So
no one's going to be more upset if Donovan McNabb makes the Hall of Fame than Andy Reid now.
That's true. Honestly, probably in real life too. So we're on to our top 2, Zach. So I mentioned this earlier. Number 2 on my list is tied. It is also 191.
Okay.
And it is also, I think, the name that was on the tip of your tongue last week, probably the most controversial placement because he is current, which is why I gave him the thing, because his current quarterback is not a Hall of Famer, so he's going to pass Andy, and did this week technically. So, or no, he didn't because he lost. But it's Mike Tomlin. Mike Tomlin is 191. Obviously, the controversial pick is on one end. Do you put him above Andy Reid? Because then you have the argument of, but Mahomes versus Big Ben, and of course, the elephant in the room is I am currently not counting Big Ben as a Hall of Famer. I will say, because he loses none. That's the argument. Sure. I've got Mike Tomlin losing none, which means not only has he lost no Hall of Fame wins ever, because in my book, he has not had a Hall of Fame quarterback. He's also actively coaching. He's the only one who's going to keep racking up this total with the Fields-Wilson combo, and whoever he has next. So on one hand, he's for sure going to be on top of this. Before I thought of Big Ben as a Hall of Famer, I'm like, he should be number one, because if I do this at the end of the year, he will be number one if I don't count Big Ben. So I've kind of hedged my bets and put him 2 for now. And I will say, you being like Eli is a concrete Hall of Famer has shattered all my confidence that Big Ben is not a Hall of Famer, because he's better than Eli. However, he was worse to women. So I don't know where all that math cancels itself out. In your book last week, you said Big Ben is a Hall of Famer. Do you still think so?
Yeah. I even just brought it up. Like, okay, so he's got 2 Super Bowl wins, obviously. So that's already like a big check.
Yeah.
He led the league in passing yards twice. He was a 6-time Pro Bowler. He has the NFL records for most games with a perfect passer rating, most 500-yard passing games, most completions in a game, and he's tied for most wins in a season by a rookie quarterback. Like, you forget how insane he was as a rookie. So like, he's a Hall of Famer. He has to be.
Bad to women. Maybe that'll keep him out.
Don't make that part of your criteria, because we got to take out a lot of Hall of Famers.
Yeah, true. We got to go back through. I got to give credit to I got to redo the Terry Bradshaw picks. Anyway, I agree. I think it's hard. I thought about just taking him off the list, because once I started thinking about it, I'm like, man, do you think Big Ben's going to get in? But I'm going to leave him there for now, because also I just didn't know where to move him. I still think he deserves to be on the list, because Big Ben was out a while ago. Tomlin's just so good, but I didn't know what credit to give him or not give him. So for now, he stays on. Because it got into some hard, like, is he in, is he not things there. So for now, he's number 2.
Keep Tomlin on until he has enough wins without Roethlisberger where he makes the list anyways. I like your thinking.
Yeah, he's just going to keep coaching, winning season after winning season. But Zach, number 1 with the bullet. I think the only argument you can make is if you get into some like Tomlin shenanigans. Sounds like you might be more privy to some Joe Gibbs shenanigans. But number 1 with the bullet, do you have the guess of who's left off this list that has to be number 1?
I truly don't know.
All right, let me lay out the hints I've given to you, okay? And then you're going to get it. Because number 1 on this list, Zach, was 197 adjusted. So he's done all of the things we've said you needed to do. So he was I won't give you his actual win total. I don't want to be that specific, but he's got a couple different quarterbacks who are just on the line of the Hall of Fame, but definitely are not making it in. He has won 2 Super Bowls and made 3, and he knows how to pick his guys to be just great, good defenses, but his quarterbacks are not Hall of Famers. On multiple teams. Any guesses?
Multiple teams. And not current, I assume.
Not current. 90s guy.
90s guy. Oh, is it Shanahan?
No, Shanahan.
No, it's not Shanahan. He had Elway.
It's the big tuna. It's Bill Parcells.
Oh. I mean, yeah. That's fair. I'm fine with Parcells.
I was doing it. I'm like, oh man, it's just obviously Parcells. I was doing all the math, because if you think about it, it's the Phil Simms rule. How good can your quarterback be?
Yeah.
Phil Simms, Drew Bledsoe. That's how good your quarterback can be. So when you think about it, it makes sense. He does, he's in there with some Cowboys years, but he never has a Hall of Fame quarterback. He never coached Aikman. So
sure,
he continues to coach Drew Bledsoe, and then he briefly coaches Tony Romo. So it's Simms, Bledsoe, Romo all the way through. So he always has a pretty good quarterback. Honestly, my only thing is it is like I'm not. I as I was going through the list, I'm like, Phil Simms should be in the Hall of Fame, but I don't know if I want to tell you that hill. He's got 2 wins. He made it. So he obviously has those 2 Giants wins. And he's just, this list is the Bill Parcells list. He's got Lawrence Taylor. He's got that defense. He goes to I think honestly, his coaching job with the Patriots. And oh, by the way, I didn't say the Jets, but like he makes all of his teams pretty good. His defense is great everywhere. No more so than with the Giants. And then that Super Bowl total takes him from an adjusted. So without the Super Bowls, he would have been at 172. So I can read that list. The non-Super Bowl list was way different. So he made it, but not this high. Counting the Super Bowl thing, him and Joe Gibbs jumped the most. So to me, it makes sense. Like Bill Parcells is, I think that argument was always there of like how good he is. And now that we've separated these other people who have a maybe Hall of Fame quarterback, it's crazy that it's like, no, he doesn't. Sims and Bledsoe are not making it.
Yeah, right. I mean, Parcells is one of the all-time greats. You talk to the all-time great coaches and they just say like how much they learned from Parcells. Like his stamp is left on the NFL forever. And like just the current NFL is insane with how much like he's affected it. So yeah, for sure. Like he's for sure. He deserves number 1. Gibbs maybe number 2. But Parcells deserves number 1. Love him. He could be, you could argue him top 5 all time, no matter what the argument is. You know what I mean?
And that's kind of what I wanted to do with this stat, right? Is like, who do you throw in arguments? And I think the ones I feel most confident throwing in arguments, and it's kind of why I left them, is like, honestly, out of my top 5, I would definitely bump like Coughlin and put Carroll in instead in my top 5. And I would probably leave the order the same. I would probably go, maybe you move your boy Gibbs up, but it's like if my top 5 is like, let's get all the other junk out of here. Like if my top 5 was Pete Carroll, Joe Gibbs, Andy Reid, Mike Tomlin, and Bill Parcells, like it's pretty great. I think you get into the niche of the Shula and the Belichick argument. And I honestly, you know what this list is? It's a fuck Don Shula list. Because I've come out of it. Don Shula is the offensive mind who's that high up the list. And honestly, Tom Landry. But Tom Landry coached for 4 decades and hung in there enough to stick in. But honestly, like Belichick, you could argue like the defense was a part of it, but Brady became Brady. I don't know, man. Like Parcells.
I don't know. There's people, including myself, forever until Brady got number 6, I think. And it's like Brady, like look at Brady's Super Bowl performances. The Patriots won despite Tom Brady a lot.
I know. And that's the argument. And so all of that. But what was eye-opening to me is, but there were guys who it's like, they don't have to make that argument. Like Bill Parcells. Like, honestly, then it gets funky of like, what I want to see happen is what happens when Andy Reid and Tomlin catch Belichick's win total. Because I think that's going to happen.
Another big part, and this isn't, we don't need to debate any of this. Just look at the assistant coaches of some of these head coaches here.
Yeah. Parcells is a big one in that way, and I think so too. Like I said, Gibbs is the weird, like Gibbs in some ways feels like the odd one out, but it's just the Super Bowl wins that like propel him into this conversation. But that's fun too. If you were going to not do the Super Bowls, just so folks don't know what that list would have looked like. Without that, I had the list made, and that list was number 10. Did I also get rid of Harbaugh, or did I have him in here? No. So in that one, my honorable mention would have been Marty, because he and Joe Gibbs have the exact same win total, but I gave the nod to Gibbs. That's what made me think of it, because I'm like, well, Gibbs had way more postseason success. So he's in there. Then number 9 was Harbaugh, but he's going to pass a bunch of people. So this was my wins list. All I did was take away their Hall of Fame quarterbacks. So Harbaugh is 9, Landry is 8, but again, Harbaugh is going to pass a bunch of these people. Then it would have been Pete Carroll, tied with Tom Coughlin.
Okay.
So those two, perpetually rivals. Then Bill Parcells. So Bill on this list would have been
4 or 3.
5.
Okay.
He would have been 5 because he'd been at 172. At 173, famously known as better than Bill Parcells, Jeff Fisher. So
I kind of like this list too.
Better. Yeah. Then Tomlin.
Okay.
So again, same Big Ben issue as before, but he's in there. Then 184. He was going to be the hero of this list before I did the Super Bowl thing. 184, second place is Chucky Knox.
Okay. Yeah.
My true hero.
For him.
And then at 186, and again, kind of stuck there forever, is Andy Reid. So before I did the Super Bowl thing, that was like the clear cut thing is like, if you take away all this shit, it's definitely Andy Reid and maybe Mike Tomlin, depending on the which way the Big Ben thing goes. But it was interesting without the Super Bowl thing that it was like, oh, Andy Reid is like that good. Which was kind of crazy. Yeah. He's Chuck Knox is Chuck Knox, you know?
That's true. People are saying that. A lot of people are.
So that was a different world. The Super Bowl thing, you can see, definitely shook it up. I thought it was funny that like Andy Reid clearly didn't benefit. It just goes to show what we used to say about on the show. Like he lost the argument with the Super Bowl success because Andy Reid gets passed with that Super Bowl list by 3 people, you know?
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, like I feel like great coaches can get you there. Super Bowl Hall of Fame quarterbacks win you the Super Bowl. And Andy Reid's like a perfect example of that.
Yeah. So I think so too. And I think it's also interesting of like, would you rather have a great coach or a great quarterback? I think from what I saw, your odds of perennial success, like, I don't know if you can super separate the two because again, at some point you're riding some guy's coattails. So if you know, and I see Randy in our comments has worst coach list. What I do want to get to someday is like,
well, he's in the comments a lot. We'll go over every single one of these over the course of the next 3 months.
That's great. My only thing I was going to say, I do someday want to do a coattail list of like who is just here because of the other guy. And that I think is always what we wanted to do with the Brady Belichick conversation is who's on whose coattails. But there's some of these guys where it's like, I don't know, Don Shula, should you be here? I don't like, or are you just a quarterback whisperer?
Yeah, he's whispering like, I'll pay you more money if you please just stay.
Yeah, it's just like, yeah, we'll go forever. So I don't know, because it's like, if I was going to get in there, the guy that I like wish I could have put on the list is like, you know who's going to be really high on my coattail list when I get to it? Fucking Terry Bradshaw.
Oh, yeah.
Because he robbed Chuck Noll of this list. Chuck Noll should be on this list. And I had to take away all his Bradshaw wins.
Yeah, Bradshaw was just there for a good time. He had the defense. He had Chuck Noll. Like, what are you doing here? I don't know.
100%. Another one where it's like again, that I think no one would argue with us about Terry Bradshaw. And that's how I sometimes still feel about Tom Brady.
Me too.
And honestly, this is wrong. I'm going to end on something I was wrong on. I really had a hard time with the Vikings because I really wanted to give credit to Bud Grant because I was like, is Fran Tarkenton that good? I was like, come on.
I love Bud Grant.
Me too. Sure. And I couldn't count them because of fucking Fran. They were like united at the hip.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We can turn a blind eye for Tarkenton. It's our list.
Yeah, fuck it. I can do whatever I want. I know. By the way, there was a real moment where I was like halfway through this when I was making it, I'm like, man, fuck Tom Coughlin. I was like, I don't know why. Out of all the guys on the list, I'm like, fraud. I was like, you shouldn't be here. Harbaugh should be.
You're not wrong. Fuck Coughlin.
It's so weird, though. Like, he is good. He's just really grouchy.
I cannot wait. There's going to be a Coughlin documentary. You can mark my words. Everybody hated the motherfucker.
Everyone hated him.
It's more than he was just grumpy, more than that he was just racist, more than all of that he treated his black players like actual filth, all of which was true. There's something more. I can guarantee it. There's something underlying here.
I know. By the way, it was gross finding out that like he was like the first Jags. Like he's the originator of the Jags.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, I've got a lot of ideas for creative, like essay form content I want to do. Let us know which ones you want to hear, but I'm going to throw a little meat out to the base. I do think a history of the Jags coaches is kind of wild at this point.
I mean, it's a pretty new team. We should do like an entire Jacksonville Jaguars history, like of that organization, what they've done and how they've continually self-sabotaged.
Because it was even looking at the Coughlin years of like Del Home and Brunell, I was like, what a wild time. And then we get into like, that's the same, like getting into Urban Meyer.
Who's the top 3 Jacksonville Jaguars quarterbacks of all time. And you cannot tell me Blake Bortles is not at least number 3.
I think he is. Because I think I listed the other. Oh, no. Yeah, I forgot about Gerard. So, I mean, it's probably Gerard, Brunell, and Delhomme, right? Is it? I don't know, man. Trevor Lawrence? Arm talent.
I think everybody is suddenly realizing Zach Bruner's not the crazy guy. Okay? Weird. Like, maybe Trevor Lawrence stinks. And you know who else I know is firmly in my corner? Fucking Doug Peterson. He hates him. He hates him.
Here's a list.
See his press conference?
Oh, that's so true. Sorry, I don't want to skip past that. No, Doug Peterson hates him. Doug Peterson also, let's do a video list sometime about the cursed existence Doug Peterson has had to live out. As they're calling for Sirianni's job in Philadelphia, I was like, you fucking fickle assholes. You had Dougie P.
Fire Sirianni. Sounds like Jacksonville's going to fire Doug Peterson. Let Doug go back, please. He deserves it.
Somehow in all of that mix-up, Urban Meyer comes back to Jacksonville.
What would happen? Like,
they'd lose a lot of football games. Well, do you bring him in and argue that it's like Trevor Lawrence argued for him? He's like, you want to fix me?
One more time. I mean, what would be,
or they hire Dabo?
That I was gonna say, what would be funnier for our show? Urban
Dabo,
another round, or Dabo? It's gotta be Dabo, right?
Dabo needs a change of scenery.
Dabo
God called
says he doesn't believe in the transfer portal. He doesn't bring in any transfer players, which is insane. Is he gonna boycott free agency? That's fun.
No,
let Dabo be GM.
Dabo's a hypocrite, so I think.
You're right.
Yeah, so I think you'll be fine. But what I was gonna say, here's a list. Randy, you're asking what's Jake's list for a future show. Zach, you and I are gonna work on this. You tag team this on your own time. Who is the worst? Let me get this wording out, and then I can fix it in real time. Who is the worst best player of a franchise ever? Like, if we went through every team and we're like, yeah, this is your best player of all time. Which of these franchises? It's like, your best player is Mark Brunell.
I got you.
You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like, who's the Jags' best player of all time? And is that the worst best player? Because, like, I think there's so many teams where it's like Packers, I've got no idea who I would pick. I can tell you they're better than whoever I would pick for the Jags. Because it would get tough and sticky up top. But what I really want to do is the bottom of that list. Because I really just want to fight out, like, who's
Pro Football Reference gives a numerical value for best players, and it's just what I believe, just what they have done for that team. Okay.
Yeah.
So I can switch it for the Packers, for example, it's Aaron Rodgers. He's 5 points better than Brett Favre. Willie Davis, number 3. I kind of like that. I think that's fair. Let's see if I just type in like Chicago. Will that bring it right there? Okay. So Chicago's best player all time. Who would you guess?
Sweetness. Walter Payton.
Yep. Not by much. Walter Payton is 8 points higher than Mike Singletary.
Yeah.
And then Urlacher is number 3. So I think
that would have been my guess. Okay.
Okay. So Jacksonville.
Who is the guess here?
I have it here. I wouldn't have guessed him. And I'll tell you, it's a wide receiver. And it's probably not the one you're thinking of.
I've got no idea.
Not a current one.
I can't even guess it.
It's Jimmy Smith. So there's your answer. Who's the worst best player of all time? We found it.
That's funny, isn't it? I think that's a funny thing to go through sometime because they're up there. Like, who's in the discussion? Texans? But it's JJ.
Andre Johnson's better.
Who's worse than Jimmy Smith? Maybe that's the question. Is there
maybe should we go out on the top 5 best Jacksonville Jaguars of all time according to Pro Football Reference?
Yeah, please.
Okay, so number 1, Jimmy Smith at 118 points, very low, played 171 games. Number 2, shout out, been mentioned on the show in recent seasons, love him, Fred Taylor. I think that's a good one.
Yeah.
So we've gone through 2, not a quarterback yet. Number 3, Mark Brunell, who you just talked about. Now,
The Hall
This
of
is
Very
where-
Good, which I will make someday, is going to star Mark Brunell.
Right. I'm going to skip to number 5 because number 5, who's the most known Jaguar to you if you had to think of
MJD.
like of all time? Yeah, MJD is number 5. Number 4, and we'll go out on this, and this is my favorite pick of the entire thing. Center, Brad Meester. Meester Beaster.
There's no other center on anyone's list.